The water workshop is in session.
There he is. Oh, Mr.
All
Ryan
right.
himself.
City manager.
I would say something else, but I
I'm
got
gonna
myself
toss
in
it to
trouble.
you while our city secretary gets the gavel.
So in line with some of the discussions we have and moving forward with the city, we did the street update at the last city council meeting. So this is the water update. And we do have Andy Vaselio here with us. He is part of the Jacob and Martin team that has been helping us with a slew of water and wastewater projects.
All right,
He
glad to
put-
have you here.
He put together a wonderful presentation
Yes.
to kind of go over where we're at and some of the thoughts to go forward. And then we also have the interim utility director, Johnny Marquez. If you need additional questions answered, he is here as well.
Great, thank you, Johnny.
And Gio's gonna share the slideshow, but it is in your packet as
Yep.
well.
No, it's a great presentation. It's very helpful with that way to operate. Thank you.
So if you want to go to the podium.
Yes, and then if you would, just in the microphone, announce who you are for the recording.
Sure. So my name is Andy Vaselio with Jacob and Martin, the consulting firm, and as Megan said, we've been doing a lot of projects for y'all. We certainly appreciate it. And I'm based out of San Angelo, our company's based out of Abilene. I've been doing civil engineering for over 25 years now, both private and public side. I normally don't necessarily introduce where I worked before, but in case I let it slip during this presentation, I used to work for the city of San Angelo, both in the engineering department and water utilities. So I'm the assistant director of water utilities for San Angelo. So I know we earlier were talking a little bit about water meters. I've been through a lot of those things from the public side as well as the private side. So first, what I'll do is just go through the presentation and speak on these things. If you have questions, certainly please stop me. And if there's other topics, certainly let me know. Real quickly to introduce on the wastewater side, we have the pre-construction conference tomorrow for the wastewater improvement project.
Good.
So we're getting ready to get that started. And very excited about that. It's gonna be a really good project. So are we. Fix some of those issues and
Yes.
we do have the application in. I don't think we've heard anything recently about getting the rest of the wastewater treatment plant issues worked out. So starting off on the first page there, just to give you an overview. The topics today will be just an overview of the water system, the lead and copper rule revision, and I'll touch on some of that. Skyway Gardens, and then the critical issues that we've seen and been working with city staff on over the past year. So the next slide there, I just want to introduce the pressure planes to explain how the operations of the water system work. That's very critical as we get into where the problems are. So the pressure planes, the first one is on the western side. That's the
So
Sunny
Andy,
Glen.
describe pressure plane.
Thank you. Yes, good. Pressure plane is a service area within that is separated by hydraulic grades or tank elevations. So they operate independently within the bigger part of the water system.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay,
So they tend to be elevation related.
correct.
That's the number one driver.
We call it hydraulic grade
Yeah,
from
yeah.
an engineering standpoint, but yes,
Yeah.
it's based on, we'll call it, the hydraulic grade is the water elevation.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm just thinking about most residents, they wouldn't
They won't
understand
know,
hydraulics,
yeah.
they'll understand
Hey.
elevation.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay.
So the first one there is Sunny Glen on the western side. And so that has the well field for the Sunny Glen, multiple wells there. And so that will serve the meters that are on that west side, but also provides the water supply into the upper hill pressure plane, which is on the western side of the city. So then the upper hill pressure plane has the upper hill tank, and it has a large number of meters, as you can see on the map. And then to the east of that is the lower hill pressure plane, and that is fed by the Mooski well field, which is up north. And then you have the Sol Ross pressure plane or the east pressure plane. Yes, sir.
So you said you can see all the meters. Are the meters represented by little black dots?
Those are those little dots. That is
Okay.
correct.
So when you say meter, most people think a meter is to their house. Is that the same what you're referring to?
That is exactly what I'm referring to. There's the
Okay.
water meter that goes from, and we're all gonna get into that in the lead and copper a little bit, but you have the main service line, which is a city owned. Then it goes to the meter, and then it goes this service line that's owned by the property.
So there's roughly 2,500 dots on here.
Yeah, I think our last count was like 2,800
Okay.
for the lead.
Sir, so you, so everyone will be able to find their meter on here.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I've not counted all the dots.
You have it. Okay, no, that's okay.
And I don't think, I even had my glasses here and I still couldn't count them on the paper.
No.
Okay.
But the 2,800 is from the lead and copper service line inventory, which I'll get into later.
Okay.
So any questions on the operations? Pressure planes? So we'll get in a little more detail on the operations as we get into some of the issues, but
So just as I think about Loop Road. There is Lower Hill Pressure Plane. That includes, and because I'm a Ward 5 guy, includes Country Club Estates. Plus those on the west side of Hancock Hill.
okay, those landmarks.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, very
Okay,
good.
I was gonna point to Johnny or Megan on that one, because some of those landmarks, I guess,
So right above Lower Hill Pressure Plane, that wording, that's Country Club.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, good. And Saul Ross has its own pressure plane. Okay, and I know we're gonna get into it a little bit later on, but the pressure plane. I'm looking for I don't see the label for it. The other, is that the other pressure plane? Is that Lower Hill? No, Upper Hill, Lower Hill. So what's the one that would be Ward 4, part of Ward 1? That area, that area. Most of them I'm thinking about Ward 4, Johnny.
So part of it, a very small part of it is Sol Ross, but the majority of it is in the Lower Hill Pressure Plane.
So that's Lower Hill pressure plane. Okay,
And what is Carpenter in?
It's Sol
Carpenter's
Ross,
in Lower.
Sol Ross and Lower Hill are basically the same thing. Sol Ross is fed off of Lower Hill from Alpine Tank.
okay, and that's how I got its
That-
name, Lower
that-
Hill
that'd
Tank.
be Mooskie's, yes.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay,
So Lower Hill, Sol Ross are all fed off of the Mooskies. Upper Hill and Sunny Glen are all fed off the Sunny Glen well fields.
so Lower Hill feeds, is Country Club Estates, so
Yes.
I'm Lower Hill.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, that Lower Hill's pretty big size, isn't it?
It's a very
Yes.
big.
Okay.
Yeah.
yes, it is.
And Upper Hill, that's the east-west side issue then.
Well, that's the west,
Yeah, but Upper is on the west side, Lower Hill's on the east side.
kind of where the city gets.
That's where we get divided.
And you'll notice that the Sol Ross pressure plane is this kind of the smallest.
Yep. Yep.
Geographically,
But-
and there is a recommendation to open that up to tie it to the upper hill, or I mean, the
Lower
lower hill.
Hill, yeah.
Because that will help with evaluation and, or elevation and pressure.
Okay, and back, and part of, I know we're gonna get into the future, and I apologize for interrupting, it's
Oh,
just
you're
my
fine.
brain's rattling through this. We have a challenge tying Upper and Lower Hill pressure planes together.
Currently, yes, but we have been.
You think you have a
working through-
solution, yeah.
Well, we really think that that very beautiful booster pump that should tie the two, it's very clean, can't even tell, it looks like it was just
It
installed.
just installed yesterday, doesn't work. Yeah.
We think that the
Getting backwards.
piping is backwards.
Okay,
We've
okay,
It
noticed
was, it was a
that,
little dusty, but it's still clean, yes.
we've noticed that with a couple other projects,
Yep.
that things have been. pretty-
okay, very good. Okay. Thank you.
And thank you for the questions. There's a lot of things that when I come and present, I've already been through for months working with.
Yeah, yeah, no, you're
Yeah.
learning.
As a
Yeah,
council
yeah.
member, you know, you're not in it day to day like the staff
Well,
is.
I'm trying to help all the residents who may
Right.
see this,
Yes,
put it in perspective and context, because of the questions
Yeah.
they're gonna raise.
exactly.
They might not understand some of the definitions or acronyms or
Yeah.
whatever.
I don't even understand. So.
So, yes, okay, there you have it.
I'm not sure
Tell-
if I should agree or disagree with Johnny on that.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, continue.
No, you're great. And I will say, Johnny's been excellent to work with and so is Megan. They've been
Yeah.
very, very helpful. So I'll go to the next slide, which is the lead and copper rule. Okay, this has been a fun one. It's been on the books for a while. Lead and copper have gone back for decades, but this rule revision has been in effect. And one of the hardest things about this rule is they give you this target deadline, which actually is tomorrow. But the rules of the game have been changing over time. And so they'll tell you, okay, you have to have this inventory ready by October 16th, 2024. For the longest time, probably up until a year ago, we didn't know where we could actually identify where the service lines that you could look at. So right now, Texas allows inside the meter box. So you open the meter lid, if you can see the line coming in from both, line coming in, line coming out, that is sufficient for Texas. Other states, they don't allow that. They require you to actually pothole outside the meter box. And it was undefined in Texas until about a year ago, plus or minus. So as we go through some of this, I just want you all to understand that there have been some challenges trying to meet a moving target, if you will. So I've been working with staff on this, trying to help them streamline the process and get the submittal. So again, the submittal is tomorrow. We cut off, so the city staff have been going out there actually doing field investigations, getting into meter boxes, finding out the service line material, city side, customer side, and putting this into like a big spreadsheet, if you will. So as of October 7th, we kind of said, okay, this is the date that we're cutting off because we have to answer all their questions, format it for TCEQ. And as of right now, it's either gonna be submitted today or tomorrow morning, and talking with Annette. They have where you can email it, but they also have, and they came out with this like a month or two ago, where Texas came out with what they call the Swift site, where you actually upload it into this website and you can go back and track that inventory. The problem with that is they came out with it a month or two ago, first of all. And secondly, they said, every time you go in there, you have to update or you have to download the new spreadsheet in case we change it. So that's another problem. So I recommend it to Annette, just go ahead and submit it electronically through email. Try the Swift site, because eventually they're gonna go fully onto this website. But we need to make sure we meet that deadline. And so we're working towards that for sure. That deadline again is tomorrow. After that, I just want you to know that the next steps are public communications within 30 days of the deadline. Everybody that's a lead service line, a galvanized requiring replacement, or an unknown has to be notified in writing. So TCEQ has some recommended language. Basically, we've been hitting hard on this October 16th deadline. Within the next month, I'm going to help the staff establish what notification criteria is necessary and get those notifications out to meet the next step of this rule. They also have specific requirements on school and childcare facilities. I'm guessing there's about 12 to 15. We have already inventoried them here in Alpine, but we haven't gone to the next step. It's kind of done a little research. We got to focus on October 16th, but we're prepared for it.
So why is it a lead and copper issue since we're focusing on lead and galvanized?
Lead is the bigger health concern, but with copper, a lot of times you'll have lead solder, which they use to combine the joints. So the lead solder can,
So, okay, so it's a solder issue.
yeah, it's
Okay.
primarily with copper, it's a
Yeah,
solder.
but solderless, I mean, that solder's like a decade ago, they changed all that.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Okay, now I get it. Thank you.
A couple questions on that real quick. Is this a state or federal mandate on lead versus lead and copper?
It is a federal mandate, but it's being administered through the states.
Okay, and then one more. Do we know where we're at, Megan, just approximately on how many lead lines, galvanized unknowns?
I have those for you.
Actually have good data.
Yep, I have exact numbers for you as of October 7th.
Yeah, so what's in here, of course, this was submitted before October 7th. So the numbers in here, he actually has.
Yep, correct. Now, the last part of that slide then is in 3 years, by October 16, 2027. All those unknowns have to be removed.
Andy, hold on one second. We
Yeah.
have a,
Reagan.
Okay, Reagan, go ahead.
Appreciate you. Thank you. I also just wanted to get a little bit more info. I'm just trying to learn about this copper lead dealio. You noted that in other states they require like digging, and I'm guessing, I think you said on the city side, is that correct?
City and customer side.
Uh-huh.
And-
And
Reagan, just so Andy knows, Reagan Stone is our Ward 1 council member.
Okay.
apologize for, introducing myself there. Good to see you, Andy. I could see you on the camera. I think you might be able to see me a little bit, but and just a note, out of your understanding and background, I'm guessing people aren't just digging holes for no reason. Does that typically get a better result, or why would other states, I know Texas is kind of a race to the bottom as far as standards, but does that typically get a better result if we dig?
Well, typically what would happen is sometimes you'll have a transition in pipe material. It may be inside the house, it may be inside the yard after the meter. So the different states and the federal requirement allows the states to have that interpretation. And so the answer to that is because the material through the yard and through the material inside the building or house can be different than what you see actually in the meter pit. And part of it too is if you have a customer who has a leak, they're gonna fix that leak as much as that leak occurs, right? So they're gonna go back with PEX or poly or some type of material. So it could be coming out, you could be coming out of the meter with, we'll say copper. They could have had a copper leak 5 years ago, replace it with PEX. You go inside the house and it could be lead. So each state had to make that decision, make and establish what that criteria is. So which one's better? I don't know. I've been in presentations where some states actually basically require you to pothole like right outside the building. What that does is that creates a bigger burden on each municipality and each water system.
Yeah.
So that's the stance that Texas has chosen, whether right or wrong. You know, we are required to follow the rules that have been placed before us.
For sure, and I'm not trying to get you to go too far into that, but my other question is, and this one maybe you can't answer or can't, did y'all say that it was about 12 meters that you've flagged so far, that folks have flagged for the city? Or what was the number on that again? That have lead or copper?
Hey,
He hasn't gotten to the.
no,
number
we're not
yet.
there yet.
Yes.
Oh, we're not there yet. Okay.
Yes, I have the numbers. It's more than 12.
Ah.
Okay,
But I'll give that to you here in a little bit if that's okay.
okay, go ahead, continue.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Time.
Yep, absolutely. And so the next big deadline is in 3 years from tomorrow. And with that deadline is we have to have the full inventory, meaning all the unknowns have to be known by that 3-year period. And then we have to work on a plan how to phase in the replacement of all the lead lines and all the galvanized lines requiring replacement. Now, one thing I want to point out, we have an election coming up. I'm not going to get into politics, but based on the election, things could change with this rule, as we know. But the big thing on this is right now, the way it's been presented in presentations I've been involved in, the city is required to go to the customers and ask them if they want the city to replace the service line that contains lead or they call them GRR, galvanized required replacement. But the city does not have to pay for it. You can work on a payment plan with them. There's different methods on how to recoup that cost. As of right now, I wouldn't worry about that. That's a 3-year deadline. That's where it stands right now, but I think it's important knowing that there is another goal in 3 years from now. So the next slide is this actually came from TCEQ documentation. It does explain the limits of ownership. So you have the water main under the street in the right of way, and then you have a service line that goes to the meter. That service line going from the main to the meter is city owned. Then you have the meter pit, city owned, maintained. After it leaves the meter pit into the house and inside the plumbing, that is the responsibility and ownership of the property owner of the house, so on and so forth. One of the big questions that's been discussed a lot, and I know I've talked with both Megan and Johnny about this, is technically you don't have a right of way to be on the property owner's property.
Right.
You have an easement up into that meter. How are you responsible for that? That has been an ongoing discussion. The last I heard is you have to offer, as I mentioned before, to replace the service line, but the property owner can reject the offer, if you will. That's where it stands now.
So just a nit.
Mhm.
Looking at the drawing where it says. Service provider responsibility includes, if it's within the box, the customer shutoff valve. That's not how we have it here in outline.
It varies from city to city
Okay.
on how they define that. A lot of times, I've always talked about at the meter itself.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And so this is a general diagram from TCEQ.
Okay, so
If
it's not
it's-
a legal document.
I've known some places, I've known some places that require a separate shutoff valve outside the meter pit because they don't want the property owner coming inside a meter pit. Some cities are okay with customers coming in to the meter pit, so it varies.
Johnny, do we have a lot of cutoff valves inside the actual meter pit?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
We
some-
require them to do it outside.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Okay,
Thanks.
yeah, sure. The next slide, I'm just gonna go over this very, very quickly. So basically, the way this TCQ form 209943 is set up, you have to put in for each account or each meter, you have to put in the city owned or system owned, the customer owned, and then it has an algorithm in that spreadsheet that then spits out what the entire service line classification is. So that entire service line classification is based on the formulas inside the spreadsheet. And so basically, if either the system or the customer is lead, then they look at the entire service line as lead. That's just how this form is set up. And then you can see if the customer side is galvanized required replacement, it switches over to galvanized required replacement. You have to have non-lead for both the city and the customer side for it to be classified as non-lead. I don't think we need to go much into this, other than the fact that, as you can see, if there's a lead line, that will be tagged for needing replacement. If it's a galvanized, specifically on the customer side, from the way this TCQ form is set up, that will at least have to offer to the customer to replace that. So that's just kind of how the form is set up. So the next slide, the next two slides are, we'll call statistics of what the city has done over the past few months. I don't know how much Megan wants me to get into this, but as y'all know, you've had quite a bit of turnover in the city staff. And so there's been a big push to get a lot of these done. And they've worked real hard, and they've really jumped up these numbers over the last few weeks, over these last couple of months. So looking at the first slide there, at this point, as of September 30th, which is when I had to submit the PowerPoint, there were a total of 2,784 accounts currently, and what we're submitting on is 2,810. So there's been another 26 or so, if my math is right, that have been added to that. And so as you go through that, about 26.2 were identified for both the customer and the city side. That's considered a fully known service line, both customer and city side. The 295 or 10.6 is for customer side only. Another 238 city side only, and then over 1,500 were not identified for the customer or the city. The sources of data. So there were questionnaires that were sent out to the public that helped establish the customer side. City staff, some of them know because they dug it up before. There's also 1988 is when the lead ban came in. So after that point, you can classify a lot of things as non-lead. So both physically looking at, investigating, plus the records that are available is how these numbers have come into place. As of October 7th, which again, I mentioned is when we're actually stopping it for the submittal, the numbers have changed a little bit. So the customer in city is increased from 729 to 986. So there's been an increase of about 250 or more that have been added to both being, we'll say, fully complete for both customer and city side. The customer only is 285, city only is 90, and not identified for either has been reduced from 1522 down to 1449. So just within that week period when I submitted the PowerPoint and when we decided on that cutoff, quite a bit more data has been established. Going to the next slide, which I think is where everybody's interest is going to be, how much lead do we have in our system? So as of September 30th, you can see there, 67 were identified as lead. There was one more added in that next week. So we're up to 68 with about a 2.4% percentage of all the accounts out there have been identified as lead. The galvanized required replacement is increased 228 to 275. And so that is now at 9.8%. The unknown went from 1991 to 1762. So that has dropped and went from 71.5 to 62.7%. So we've dropped nearly 10% on the unknowns based on the data that was accumulated in that last week. Non-lead has gone from 498 to 705 and gone from 17.9 to 25.1. So as of the data we have right now, a quarter of your system is identified as non-lead. About 2.5% is identified as lead. About 10% is galvanized requiring replacement, and 63% is still unknown. So that's the current standings. There was a presentation I was involved in about a month or two ago, and it was put on by a vendor. They were soliciting their computerized algorithm program and they have multiple clients throughout the country. And I just want to give you a perspective of how the city of Alpine is doing of getting and obtaining this data. At that meeting, again, a month or two ago, they said their average customer had about 50% of their lines inventoried. Smaller systems, which Alpine would fit in the smaller systems, was about 40%. We ended up with about 35%. So we're a little bit under the national average of this program. But what I will say is there's been a very big substantial push recently, and a lot has been done very recently. So I would say definitely a good job by the staff making this push. Any questions on lead and copper?
So. What I'm trying to do is take this data, which is very helpful, and say, so what's the city exposure relative to what we know now, and what does the city need to do?
So the next step is that 2027 deadline, so no immediate action is necessary
I
other
got
than those
that.
notifications.
Yeah, but 2027 is gonna come faster than we all want,
Right,
and we're gonna have a lot of things to go do to get done. So what do we have to do between now and 3 years from now?
so within the next 3 years, first of all, we gotta finish the inventory. And I've already talked to Johnny, I've already talked to Megan, I've already talked to Annette. Every single meter, I think, needs to have physical eyes on it
So
and
that's
identify that.
almost 2,000 of them?
The unknowns were, it was about 1,800,
Yeah, okay, 1,800. So we gotta do 1,800 more to do,
yes.
okay? And we've been working on this for how long?
Dedicated actual employee time?
Yeah.
3 months.
Oh, that's not, so we have another 6 months worth of work to go do there. So that's one item.
If we keep the current pace, absolutely.
So that's how many employees?
7.
So that's 7 people full-time for 3 months at least.
And that's on top of.
Water
not-
leak,
Yeah, so that's
tap
20 man hours. So
assessment.
that's 2 man years. Just simply put it. Okay, so there's 2 man years worth of effort, okay,
Mhm.
then what?
And then after that, you have to put together the plan for replacing all the lead and galvanized requiring replacement.
And that's the bigger issue.
So first it's knowing what we have to replace, and then it's actually replacing it.
Yeah,
And we're still pending the Water Development Board's grant that
Yeah.
helps us complete the inventory and actually put in a plan.
Okay.
So that hasn't, I mean, we're eligible, but we haven't moved on to the next step.
is this something we ought to sub out, or we're not far enough along to think about it?
I would say we're not far enough along to think about it. Without, I mean, to sub it out, you're gonna wanna say, okay, I wanna replace A, B, C, and D.
No, I'm just talking about getting the meters done, get them checked first so you know what to go do then.
No, I really think we need to keep it in-house because we have a green team. They need to know where the meters are at.
Well, that's for
They,
sure.
they need
Yeah.
to know the different types of material that are in the ground.
Yep.
So for me, and Johnny can tell me I'm wrong because he is short-staffed. This is 100% training and understanding, this is a
Yeah.
meter customer, this is what galvanized steel looks like, this is what poly.
Yep.
And we currently manually read all the meters, so it's not like they're not doing it to begin with.
Yeah.
Instead of it taking 5 minutes to read a meter, maybe it takes 10 because they're having to clean out.
We gotta clean them all out, yeah.
Some could be 20-30 minutes. There's some that are 2-inch meters, and believe me,
Yeah,
you
Yep.
gotta dig.
I know,
Yeah.
I know. Yep.
And there's some that are on concrete, there's some that are, you're
Yep.
very lucky, go up there, there it is.
Yep,
It also gives us the opportunity because as we talk about our water, we talk about smart meters, we talk about, issues with our meters to begin with. Making sure that they identify, okay, this is a working meter, this is a non-working meter. Oh, look, we even have a water leak here.
yeah, that's it.
As a matter of fact, we just encountered one right now, earlier today.
Okay. So it'd probably be, I know, Megan, you've got this on one of your standard 4 items to talk about. It's just helpful, once a month, gotta give us an update where you're in that process. You're trying to go through or click down 1,800 meters is what I
Yes.
think.
So for sure, the next 30 days after tomorrow, we send out the letter to let those residents know that this is, hey, what you've been identified for.
Yep.
Then we take the next year and set the deadline within a year, we're gonna have our inventory complete, and then within the second year, we're gonna have, okay, this is how we're gonna phase out the things that need to be. And that's why that hiring event that I had mentioned
Yeah.
earlier is important, we're gonna try to hire on the spot.
So, and from a simplistic standpoint, if your house or where you live was built after 1988, your risk is pretty low.
Yes, you should not have any.
You shouldn't have any of that stuff. Okay.
And that was one
Yeah,
of the things too, we used the appraisal district and utilizing try to using the shape
Shape
file.
files.
Okay.
So we do have the GIS, the geographical information system. But it was not useful for this project because we weren't established in it. So
Yeah.
whereas if we had been establishing it, we could have just printed stuff out, plugged it in. They were trying to establish it as well as trying to do what TCQ wanted. But I think we utilize the appraisal district and understanding so that that could be a clean sweep with, okay, these aren't gonna be lead.
Yep.
And then don't forget, in 2003, the city of Alpine redid the water system on the south side. So a lot of that piping on the city side was replaced.
Which is good news. Then it's the resident side.
So then it made it easier, but we still had to go and.
Yeah,
That's the way Andy said, you know. We replaced this city side.
Yeah.
Well, let's say your house, you didn't replace it, so that
You got-
flags and everything. you know?
Yep, yep. Well, then you
We're
got
back
the
to
water.
square one.
Yeah, you got the water replacement issue anyway. Yeah. Okay.
All right, so we have
Okay.
about half an hour left. If you have more questions on water lead, go ahead and write them down and save it for the end. That way we can get
This
to the
was excellent.
presentation.
It
Yes,
was
it
excellent.
is.
The last thing I'll add is replacement has a 10-year replacement period. So,
Ah,
so
Okay.
okay.
the lead is 68 right now, the ground, galvanized component replacement is 275. Let's say we come up with 500 total. Basically, you set aside 50 meters per year over the next 10 years, so 2037. As of right now,
All right.
regulations may change. You have 10 years to complete those replacements.
The water dim program.
Yes,
That's what it is. Yeah, it's
basically.
dim. Yeah.
All right.
So-
continue.
The next item there is Skyway Gardens. This is a study that was done over a year ago. And essentially, this is a potential development area on the south end of town. I believe outside of city limits, if I'm correct.
No.
It's inside city limits.
It is. Uh-huh.
It did annex, okay.
Yes.
Thank you for the clarification on that. And so when the hydraulic study was completed, it was within the lower hill pressure plane, but the lower hill pressure plane did not have the hydraulic grade or we'll call it the elevation to gravity serve it off of the pressure there. Therefore, to serve this area, the recommended solution was to go ahead and revise the boundaries between the Sul Ross plane and the lower hill plane and put that area under the Sul Ross pressure plane. As mentioned before, those two planes interact together on the water supply. It would just basically be closing some valves and opening some other valves to do so. The next slide does show what the recommended revised boundaries are to provide water service to Skyway Gardens. And again, it would impact some customers. The water sources would still the same. It's just how the water's flowing through the pipes would be different.
So you're using basically the Sul Ross tank pressure to drive.
Correct.
And water pressure for the customers will remain the same?
It would increase.
Oh.
Yeah, Sul Ross is at a higher elevation
Yeah,
than
that's
the lower
great.
hill.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
gotta be
'cause there's
35
problems out
PSI is
there.
medium. Well, Sul Ross is okay.
But the,
Lower side would work. Yeah.
yes, over there with Skyway.
Yep,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, and as part of the hydraulic study, we made sure the pressures weren't too high as well.
Yeah, blow up.
Good deal.
Good. Any questions on that?
So when's that gonna happen?
That is a future project, to kind of decipher how do we tie the two, if it's an issue of adding a section of piping. Have those two valves to be able to connect the two. With council's blessing, this would be an engineered project and we would go out for bids, to at least get a cost. We do have some money within, obviously, the reserves to complete this project. But the recommendation, and I believe by staff as well, because we've all talked about it, is to go ahead and tie it. Instead of trying to add more elevation
Oh, yeah.
tanks or anything like that, this would be the most cost effective.
Cool.
Okay.
And Alpine Heights would be beneficiary, would they not?
Yeah.
Because you're on a long plane. Yeah, we know this discussion. Yep. Okay. Thanks.
What Johnny said.
I know, I spent a lot of time over there. I know you spent a lot of time making sure that tank gets full, because when pressure goes down, Alpine Heights, which we have, how many units in Alpine Heights? 170? Yeah, third floor always runs out of water. Yeah, yeah, so.
Not
okay.
surprised.
Yeah, okay. That'll help them. Thank you.
So the next item are the three highest critical issues that we've been dealing with. The first one is the supply and sources. The second one is, let me make sure I hit it correctly, is the Upper Hill, Lower Hill Pump Station, which does tie in a little bit into the water supply sources. And then the third one is the Pierce tank operation. So I'm gonna cover them individually. I do want to start with the water supply sources. The short answer to this is you need additional water supply in the Upper Hill pressure plane in the Sunny Glen well field. What's happened, I've received some information from Johnny and Megan and staff that basically over time, you've lost more wells. You've been sold back to property owners. They've had to be abandoned for capacity issues or whatever, and you haven't replaced them with new wells. So the first recommendation is there's a Lewis test well out there. Try and get that developed to have an additional water source out there. And I'll show you the data here as we go through the slides. The first slide has the spreadsheet calculations here. There is one error on that I do need to clarify because it actually makes it look worse. So if you look about halfway down there under the well, there's the South Upper Hill well, and it's defined as the Upper Hill pressure plane. That's actually, I learned recently, part of the Lower Hill pressure plane, and it's currently not even being used because it doesn't have chlorination facilities. So essentially that well should be removed from the spreadsheet completely because you can't inject chlorine in there to provide potable water. So you see that's about 210 gallons a minute. That actually, when we look at these charts, we're going to be dropping everything down by 200 gallons a minute from the available supply in the Upper Hill pressure plane. A couple other items you can see, some of them are circled there, 88%, 98.2%. That's how much that well was running in 2023. So basically that 98%, basically that well will not ever shut off based on these records. For a well, in general, you want to have them shut off probably about 50%, because you can imagine running a well pump more than 12 hours a day consecutive over time. That's a very large burden on a well pump. In addition, you have the aquifer and the impact of the aquifer. The other note there is Roberts 3 is listed as 300 gallons a minute. Very recently, probably within the last 2 months, I'd say, Johnny, that it was down to about 150 gallons a minute. They've done an improvement project to get that flow rate back up to 300. So for a period of time, going back into 2023, it was actually less than 300 gallons a minute. So that actually is a little bit deceiving as well. Again, further showing the need for new supply. So the next slide that shows for the complete city. I printed black and white. I wish I had a color copy right now. But the top horizontal line there, that is the full capacity, all wells coming on at one time. Okay, so that's probably about 2,200 gallons a minute. Every single well turning on can produce 2,200 gallons a minute. The next horizontal line below that, that's the 75 percentile. Usually when you talk about water supply, once you hit about that 75%, it's time to get and plan for and start developing a new water supply source, whether it's a well or other type of sources. So the bottom graph is the actual per day average for each month from 2020 through 2023. So as you can see, a couple of months peak up during the summer months, but in general, you're staying well below that 75% line. And really some of the peak months are only about 50%. So overall from a city, it's not looking too bad. So the next slide is the Lower Hill pressure plane. The lines mean the same thing. And as you can see there, the Lower Hill is in good shape. That's the Mooski well field is doing just fine. The next slide is the Sul Ross. This one is one of the deceiving ones. So that's showing basically you're running the east well so much that your demand in that Sul Ross pressure plane is more than that well can supply. But as we mentioned earlier, the Lower Hill and Sul Ross pressure planes are tied in together. So the Sul Ross pressure plane is being supplemented by the Mooski well field of the Lower Hill. So again, even though it looks like you're selling more water than you can produce, it's being supplemented by the Lower Hill, which is on the next slide. So the next slide is to combine Lower Hill, Sul Ross pressure planes together. Because you can produce water in the Mooski well field through the Lower Hill and bring it into the Sul Ross pressure plane, this is a true representation of the eastern half of the city. And as you can see, you're well below even the 75 percentile. So you're doing pretty good shape there on the eastern side.
It's the west side.
So then the next slide is the Upper Hill pressure plane. And keep in mind, this is the average day for each of those months. So as you can see, some of these per day averages in some of these months are exceeding that 75% already. also subtracting the 200 gallons a minute from the upper hill well, which I said was miscategorized. And so, as you can tell, and if you talk to Johnny at all, I have during summer months and for most of the year, really struggling to keep up with water supply for the western half of the city through the Sunny Glen pressure plane and through the Upper Hill pressure plane. Definite need to provide additional supply there. Any questions on the graphs? I went through them kind of quickly.
It just says move to the east side.
The Ward 5 instead of 3.
Yeah.
That clay valve doesn't give out.
Yeah, there you go.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, no, this is great data. Thank you very much, because we've been looking for this. This is very, very helpful.
Okay, well, and I will tell you again, thank you to city staff, because Megan got multiple emails asking for this data. Cause I knew it would show what you needed to see to make a decision.
Yeah, no point.
Saying we need a new well is different than seeing why you need a new well.
Right.
So the solutions, first solution, I think the quickest one, and I'll get into this in a little bit, is repairing an Upper Hill, Lower Hill pump station. I'm not gonna dive into the detail right now, but again, develop new well or wells in the Sunny Glen well field is definite a need, and I think the best solution right now would be to take that test well, the Lewis test well, and start planning to get that developed. That will provide, I don't know what the capacity, but I think it was a pretty good producing well from what I remember, isn't it, Johnny?
100, like, 500 gallons a minute.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So it's a very good producing well, and that would really help out.
So what is the latest from doing the Upper Hill, Lower Hill pump station? What's the issue? Other than money.
Are we ready for that?
Well, that's why I
Next
asked.
slide,
sorry.
Next slide.
next slide.
The next two slides cover this one, okay? So,
Oh, this is the Ogden pump station backwards.
yeah, so this is the Upper Hill, Lower Hill pump station. It's between the Upper Hill, Lower Hill pressure planes and between the storage tanks. And so, in talking with Johnny and Megan, I learned what the situation was. They sent me plans. I reviewed the engineering plans. I went out there on site. I don't know if it was a design issue, I don't know if it was a construction issue, but it sure seems like that pump station was not rotated backwards, but mirrored. What I mean by that, you look in a mirror, you see the reflection,
Yeah.
it should have been hooked up the wrong way. Now, the only disclaimer on that is I don't know how the yard piping's connected.
Yeah.
They had the plans, and I talked with Johnny about, hey, this is what they showed, there's supposed to be like a control valve between them. Johnny said there's no control valve between them. I don't know how it's connected. But if it's connected like common sense would say, or it comes straight in from both sides, then to me, whether it was a design issue, whether a construction issue, it wasn't piped up or it wasn't oriented correctly. So there's two solutions on that. Well, the first thing is we need, and I've talked with Johnny about this, again, he's chasing his tail, he's trying to make sure everybody has water. Whenever we get a chance, we need to dig up that yard piping, confirm how that yard piping is connected to the pump station. That's the most important thing, because otherwise we're just making assumptions on what the problem is. But the second slide actually shows a little bit of a picture. And I don't know if you can see here, they call that a blind flange.
Yeah.
Right here, that blind flange, from what I can tell from seeing, look at the plans and how the system's oriented, that should be connected. The blind flange should be on the other side of the pump station. So instead of pumping from the from the lower elevation tank up into the higher, it's actually hooked up to pump in the opposite direction, which explains why it hasn't been working. And really, I've talked to Johnny, what happens when you turn that pump station on? And what he explained, pressure is getting really high. That makes perfect sense. You're pumping from a lower elevation tank into a higher elevation tank. All you're doing is add more pressure into the system that already has more pressure.
So how long will it take to at least dig it out to figure out what we got?
We put it on hold for the lead and copper. Now that that's on a deadline and we're coming to it, we just need to schedule.
Let's go 3 days of digging with the backhoe? I don't know, I'm asking.
Yeah,
If-
it's going out,
Meetings, it all depends, leaks, it all depends.
Yeah.
it's going out there and digging it up, but we also don't know exactly where it comes into it. So it's not just digging up a small, we're gonna have to dig up the whole.
I'd call 811 and ask them where it's at. Sorry.
We have some assumptions. We know it's coming in from the backside of the building. It's just a matter of,
Oh, yeah, okay. Okay,
and I know when we dig it up, we want Andy to be here so
Yeah.
that we're not leaving it open.
Yep.
The whole time.
okay.
Yeah, and again, the main thing is we want to see how that piping is. To me, the simplest solution is leave the pump station the way it is.
Replumb.
You don't want to tear that apart.
Now replumb.
Basically just crisscross the piping.
Sure.
Hopefully that's what the solution is.
Yep, okay.
But the big solution that this would provide, so I mentioned right before, the western half doesn't have enough water supply, the eastern half has more than enough. We can pump from the eastern side over to the western side to supplement the supply over there. And I think that would solve a lot of problems. And Johnny would actually be able to sleep at night during the summer.
That would be nice, right, Johnny?
It's been.
The next one there and the final one that I have on the agenda is the Pierce tank operations. So, talking with Johnny quite a bit over the past few months, obviously about many different topics, but about this one. The Pierce tank is in the extreme northwest part of the system. It is basically the Sunny Glen well field. The wells pump into ground storage tanks that go into the booster pump station at Sunny Glen, that then pump into Pierce tank and allow it to flow back into the upper hill pressure point and into the upper hill tank. There's a couple control valves that help separate the pressure point between Sunny Glen and Upper Hill. The problem right now is those booster pumps cannot fill Pierce tank other than 2-3 feet at most. I don't know why. Jacob and Martin did a computer model when we did the Skyway Gardens. At that time, it wasn't we'll call it a full system model, but there was enough infrastructure in there where I had somebody check it. I don't see any reason hydraulically why it shouldn't be pumping. Some of the circumstances where Johnny explained to me back in 2020, this happened, then we couldn't start filling it.
Yeah.
It doesn't make a lot of sense from an engineering standpoint. We've already checked valves, make sure some of them are open or closed. Leaks we've talked about. So what I'm gonna say is the most obvious answers and solutions out there have already been investigated. And I think Johnny's probably tired of checking valves and leaks because he's been asked to by Jacob and Martin 2 or 3 times. We do have a plan in place to, hey, check this. So we have, I think, 2 or 3 more steps to go that will hopefully identify it. But I mean, really, it's a big unknown as to why we can't fill that tank right now.
So you know it's not a leaky tank,
No. No leak.
you know, and there's no way to seal that off, just fill it up and see what happens?
I can push everything up there, well, we can push everything in one day
Yeah,
and
then let it sit, leave it closed off.
we close it off. Hello, we open it up to send water to town. And we don't know where the water goes.
But you know. But you know it's not a leaky tank, or you don't know.
It's going into the distribution system somehow. We just don't know why it's not staying.
It's not going up to the Pierce.
Okay,
So the tank is supposed to be for what, redundancy to help with the storage?
yeah.
It's just basically a pass through. It doesn't. And I've been part of the conversations. We've turned some valves off to see, is that supplying certain parts of Sunny Glen? Cause you've got those meters on that back end of Sunny Glen. Didn't do a thing.
But you can't isolate the tank.
I have it isolated right
You have it isolated
Yeah.
now? Oh, okay,
So we're not using it.
you're just not using it, but you can't fill it up while it's isolated? Okay, okay.
now. Right now, I mean, I can fill up the real tank. We're doing it manually,
Yeah.
but I just can't, we can't fill up your tank at all. I don't
Okay.
know what's going on.
Okay,
Yeah, one of the next steps is to actually close some gate valves in the distribution system
yeah,
to allow water from that pump station only go to Pierce tank.
yeah, okay.
But we haven't been able to do that between the lead and copper and between the
Yeah,
summer
okay.
months and the supply issues
We
too.
didn't want to cut off residents.
No, I
Yeah.
get you, I understand. Okay.
So that's one of the potential solutions. The other one we looked to do like pressure monitoring or flow monitoring.
Yeah.
So you can see how pressure flow split between different branches in the system. So we have some further investigations to do. But there's the very open, easy answers have already been looked at multiple times.
But it's priority wise, it's last on your list, I presume.
It is because you're getting by with it
Oh, well,
offline right now.
If you get upper tank taken care of, now you're taking care of the west side.
Yes,
And then we could go back to. the
TCQ showed up, we passed.
Okay,
Good.
okay,
That's what I was worried about.
yeah, okay. Okay, that's why I'm trying to understand your priorities, you're working your way through. You really want to get, of the items, you're trying to get the upper hill, lower hill pump taken care of.
yes,
You're trying to get,
Oh, well.
new well.
new well, and you're trying to work the,
East side.
I'm sorry?
East side.
Yeah. Okay, that's, and this one is bottom of the list.
Yeah, what I would say is like, with those other ones, if you put the new pump station on or the new well, there's gonna be a design phase, there's gonna be a TCQ review phase, you know, I mean, there's gonna be different steps.
Yeah.
As those are going on and there's not current activity, then we can continue working on these solutions. But again, part of it is Johnny's trying to keep everybody in water.
Which is, the reality around here is, it
Exactly.
ain't gonna happen. I mean, I just expectations ought to be low relative to that. Okay,
All
okay.
right,
I have
Darren?
confidence in Johnny, I think he can get it done.
I did have one question on that, and Rick pretty much answered it. So Pierce tank's not as important as, once the pump station that connects those two planes happens, Pierce tank isn't as much of an issue.
Right, the way it's set up is those pump stations are pumped to Pierce, and it's both the gravity from Pierce to the upper hill tank, which is a lower elevation through those control valves. But right now with Pierce being offline because we can't fill it up, it's just going through those control valves to the upper hill tank, and it's still keeping everybody serviced. In fact, one of the things that Johnny went out there and checked is there were some key customers in the Sunny Glen pressure plane. He actually went out and checked pressure both with the pump station on, pump station off to make sure they had suitable pressure.
The other thing to remember, and Johnny, correct me if I don't remember correctly. Because Pierce is down, we're manually taking care of the other two storage tanks. So instead of the SCADA system being on auto and it doing its own on and off and regulating, we're having to go in every so often, like during the summer, every hour on the hour, every 45 minutes, and actually move the pumps on and off to move the water.
Is that because the SCADA system sees Pierce low and thinks it needs to?
Right now, it's being based off of Pierce. I have the SCADA guy, James Sipes. We can do it, but right now we were almost at the end of the year. And he said, I just told him, just hold off on that, wait until the beginning of the year, then we'll swap out everything. We'll base off the booster stations off of Upper Hill Tank and we'll.
There you go, there you go.
But so right now, everything's manually being done because
Yes,
Pierce is.
right now I have a
doing
guy doing it
control.
24/7, myself and another two guys.
And when does that slow down enough because the temperatures come down enough?
It's slowing down slowly,
Okay,
but what's weird about, like, you know,
They're using water.
from midnight to 3, I mean, it's supposed to be dead hours. No,
No,
people have turned on the sprinklers then.
exactly,
Yeah,
you know, and I can lose 7 feet.
Yeah.
Uphill thing.
Yeah.
Like that.
yeah, no, it is amazing.
Yeah.
It is, yeah, well, the reason I watch my water pressure at my house, because I only get like 10 to 15 PSI at my, up to my house, even about 35 meter. And I watch how that rate, it's amazing at night. It is amazing.
East up, it's different.
Yes.
So Ross, I don't know what they're doing at midnight.
Hey, they're up using the toilet because all the kids are studying.
Yeah.
You hope they're studying. This has been super. Yeah, thank you.
So now over the next few months, you guys are gonna start getting those agenda items to discuss how do we move forward with the projects.
Yep.
As far as, do we want to dig deeper into an actual engineering specification so that we can go out for bid? Looking at funding opportunities or utilizing with what we have, so that we can start getting them taken care of.
That pump that you mentioned, is that the one that we were negotiating with the one gentleman? For Sunny Glen back in the day, or?
Stephen
No,
Harvey.
so Mr. Daugherty has offered to allow us to reconnect to the well that we used to have in our system. It's one of the wells we've given back to the property owner. And I know he's got representation, or he's on the as an option to, and it's the same thing, it would have to be engineered, it would have to get TCEQ.
A lot of steps.
We wanted to understand the full scope of our water system. And then what do we have within our own access and what do we have available? So that's why for the past, 6 months, we've actually really been working on all of the information
And about just cleaning out that one well, we went from 150 to 300.
for this go round.
Wow.
Doesn't mean it will last.
Well, it's
We did it last year too.
Oh,
So we have a well in our own ownership currently that we could
There you go.
do ourselves. And then, of course, that pump station, the city knew it was a big deal in 2010, but for whatever reason, it just wasn't done properly. And then it was just, they closed the doors, locked the fence, and went about their business. And so having that brought back online and evaluating it could also help us. But then there is the long-term sustainability as far as the demand has gone up, population is not increased to what we would like, but it has. But we've given them back about 14 wells from what we originally had. So we need to look at either adding back into our well system. And I know we've talked about it, and I know Andy's been working on it because we're required to have it for our TCQ lead and copper application. But we have to have a conservation plan. And I think the city really does need to look at how do we move forward with our water. I always say I'm not worried about running out, but I am very worried that we waste it. And so maybe we need a watering schedule. We're odd and even days. So that's something else that will be coming before council as well.
Okay, we have 3 minutes remaining. Do I see a hand up? I can't read it.
It's Mr. Daugherty.
Okay, we have 3 minutes remaining, Mr. Daugherty. Did you want to come online?
Sure, this Stephen Doherty. I want you to understand that you have an opportunity to add on a well that pretty consistently can produce 200 gallons a minute. It has produced as much as 500 gallons a minute in past years, though pumping that much is not wise. I think you've got a real problem with capacity in Sunny Glen, and the absolute capacity of all your wells running simultaneously is not what you need to look at. You need to look at what happens when you have wells that are not producing at capacity or down. We will continue using our water for irrigation and develop other things that'll use the water eventually, but I have tried to keep the water available without bigger investments so that the city could pick up a long-term contract. We've got a well that's produced a lot of water for the city of Alpine, averaging about 170 gallons a minute year round for the years for which there are records that the city actually produced from that well. So that's a lot of water that well's produced. It is there. It will require some work with TCEQ since the city left the contract in 2005, but it may not always be available.
Thank you, Mr. Daugherty. All right, we have 1 minute remaining. Are there any other questions or comments?
I just have one final one on the lead and copper. Is that the ones that are lead? Is that centralized in any part of the city?
I don't have an answer for that off the top of my head. I'd have to go through the inventory. We were in such a mad rush to get data and to categorize it for the submittal that I couldn't even tell you the addresses.
Gotcha.
That's a great question. I assume it's in the older parts of town.
South side, old part.
And like the way you said it. It could be city side completed, customer side, well,
Gotcha.
that reflects it.
Yeah.
So.
Anything else? No, thank you. All right, and thank you, Mr. Daugherty. And with that, we're gonna conclude the workshop 5 p.m. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Thank you.